A mortal, a god, a hero, a monster. Kratos was all of these at different points in his life. From a proud Spartan fighting for the glory of Sparta to a vengeful person slaying gods, monsters, and mortals alike. With his previous character arc finally having come to the end in the new release of the Valhalla DLC, it seems Kratos has finally reached his long-deserved peace. Whether this is the end for the character itself, I certainly hope not, but only time will tell. But before we dig in, I just want to commend Santa Monica Studios for really being the GOATs of all time. They produced a free DLC with about 10 hours worth of content in like an industry where games are like $70 a pop. Even the new like Modern Warfare 3, which to be honest is nothing more than a glorified update. But Santa Monica's GOAT, 10 hours of content. I can't wait for what they do in the future. Anyways, I want to come back to the premise. And I really got this idea from the Valhalla game itself. And it really hit me when Kratos was in Valhalla and there was a bunch of times where there was mental blocks where he couldn't progress through Valhalla without starting back from where he was and working on any new information he learned. And this kind of hit a light bulb in me. Kratos is an emotionally messed up individual, as evident with his horrible life filled with mostly pain and suffering. This is obviously present within like all the God of War games, even most presently in the 2018 God of War and God of War Ragnarok. But it never truly did strike me just how deep this rabbit hole goes until this game itself. It is not hard to see why. Kratos is portrayed as a super masculine badass who always has his shit together. So it's hard to see just how deep his problems truly go. So that's kind of the purpose of this video. I want to dive into Kratos' life, acquire a pretty good psychological profile so we can accurately diagnose him and see how well the story truly understands their character and see if they've gone through the appropriate steps to save him from his mental anguish. So sit back, we're going to talk about the story of Kratos, the god of war. Before continuing, I just want to make it very clear that I am not a mental health professional, nor am I currently in school to become a mental health professional. All the information I found in this video was from research done for the purpose of this video. You can find the doc linked in the description if you're interested in reading it. If you are in need to be diagnosed or treated, it is better to contact a licensed professional for your own personal matters. That being said, from all that I've examined from Kratos, I believe him to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I singled this one out alone because I've seen other people online also diagnose him with some form of ASPD or antisocial personality disorder. I disagree because he doesn't fall into these categories. He does not give symptoms of manipulation, egocentrism, impulsivity, or irresponsibility. As well as most of his actions can be described in the light of PTSD in a more cohesive manner. So to understand how I got to this conclusion, let us analyze his life. Kratos was born in Sparta, one of the most notorious empires throughout history, renowned for their mighty warriors and conquest. Kratos was no different. From a young age, he was molded to become a warrior. If you are unaware, in the real world, Spartans didn't play about training. Children are put into an educational and training program called agoge. I don't know if I pronounced that right, which was designed to create soldiers which could endure war. They taught kids how to read, write, sing, dance, and communicate, as well as other aspects like hunting, fighting, and stealing for their survival. All while being barefoot, and they only received new clothing items once every year. Understandably, these living conditions are highly likely, if not a guarantee, to have traumatic events take place during the youth of children, especially where children are more likely to experience deeper emotional scarring. Kratos himself was renowned for his aggression even in the Spartan military. He even commanded his own Spartan army in many battles. If it isn't evident, war is an environment where PTSD is rampant. Unfortunately, we can see a real-world example of U.S. veterans in the military can have percentages of anywhere from 10 to 30% of troops have PTSD at some point in their life. Unfortunately, Kratos and his army went to battle against an army of barbarians and were severely outnumbered. This caused Kratos to make a deal with Ares, the Greek god of war, having the blades of chaos be scorched into his very arms. This did guarantee Kratos victory in the war, but now he was at the behest of the Greek gods and Ares in particular, nothing but a mere pawn. And then one fateful day, Kratos was tricked by Ares into slaying his own wife and daughter, with their ashes forever being branded on his skin. If you weren't convinced by the previous actions, this is a guaranteed traumatic event in his life, as he was the direct actor to the slaying of his family. Further evidence by him attempting to suppress these memories, which in turn led to a deep festered hatred for the gods. These are clear signs of distressing memories of the events. He has flashbacks of committing the act, as well as intense psychological stress when exposed to cues of the event, in this case being Ares himself, since it was Ares was the one who tricked him into killing his family. Kratos then continues with his revenge, eventually wiping out the entirety of the Greek pantheon of gods. However, in doing so, it worsens his conditions, as revenge has no reported effect on healing the symptoms of PTSD. In fact, he makes his condition worse in the long run, as during his quest for massacre, he dwells deeper into his thoughts and hatred and ends up killing countless undeserving innocents, as well as focusing more on revenge than build connections with people, such as choosing to let Pandora go, allowing her to sacrifice himself so that he could confront Zeus. These are all negatives. Those deaths bring a lot more traumatic events into his life, as well as already building on pre-existing conditions he already has, also relinquishing the connection he had with people who can benefit in his recovery process. The next time we see Kratos is in Midgard is estimated about 1,000 years after the slaying of the Greek pantheon, where at first sight he seems a bit more tranquil than the previous games, but we soon learn it's not all as it seems. Kratos still harbors a deep mistrust and hatred for the gods. It's evident that his late wife Faye was an anchor for him in his relationship, and his son Atreus, and his relationship in fatherhood with his son Atreus is practically not there. Which is one of the few negative cognitive alterations of his condition, which is feeling detachment and estrangement. Kratos goes as far as to hide the fact that Atreus is a god from him in hopes that the life Atreus will tread will not, or the life that Kratos has tread will not happen to Atreus. These are clear signs of efforts to avoid distressing memories related to the traumatic event, which is another sign of someone suffering from PTSD. And no, this was not a protective measure to protect Atreus. The game makes it very clear in supporting this. Hiding the nature from Atreus caused him sickness and harm throughout the game. And while yes, Atreus was a short-lived piece of shit after learning his true nature, through the guidance, or rather the scolding of Kratos, he was led to the right path again. He also avoids or even fears reminders of external cues of his events, such as when he killed Heimdall, or when he discovered Freya was a god. Even though Heimdall presented himself as a clear threat to him and his son, as well as Freya being nothing of aid up until the point he learned about her being a god in the first game, he was still troubled by the actions that he has taken or the information he learned from Freya. Speaking of anger, it's something that we haven't yet touched on. Kratos is an angry individual, and he always has been. But his rage in the games is turned up to an 11 after the initial onset of his PTSD. This is also described in the diagnosis of PTSD, as he experiences irritability and expressive angry outbursts, as well as hypervigilance, which just means that he's always on guard, and just look at Kratos, he's always ready for some shit. These are all external processes. We can examine Kratos' behavior and make all these deductions, but there are some internal processes within him that haven't been fully shown to us until the release of Valhalla. The reason this is because Kratos is an extremely closed-off individual, which means his deep thoughts and feelings are not privy to being expressed or spoken. Luckily for us, Valhalla constructs its trials off the state of the person entering it. Throughout Valhalla, we can see him undergo remembering aspects of his past as he seems agonized by reliving those moments, even having to send him out of Valhalla to recollect his thoughts. This could be signs of dissociative amnesia, of the traumas he has endured. At the end of his journey, he comes across a projection of his younger self and begins expressing exaggerated negative beliefs about himself, questioning if he would ever be worthy of a redemption, before finally coming to terms with his past and donning the throne once more. But this time, not with anger or malice as he once had previous, however with contempt and reconciliation of his story. But does this make sense? Are the actions that Kratos has taken in his story, primarily in the realm of Norse mythology, a true depiction of what needs to be done to undergo the healing process of someone who has PTSD? I mean, in the events of the game, he did go to war with another another pantheon of gods, in this case being the Norse gods, and yet the surprising answer is yes. Kratos has gone through several real life steps that people who suffer from PTSD in the real world go through within the course of these games. One of the greatest predictors of a successful process is a healthy environment. And while it is true that Kratos does go through quite the trials and tribulations within these games, the connections he fosters are extraordinarily powerful. His relationship as a father with Atreus, a guide and a friend in Mimir, Freya, Brock, Sindri, and many more by the end of the game. He's even regarded as a proclaimed leader or a hero to the Nine Realms. Having healthy connections with an individual can harbor a safe space for emotional growth and self-expression, as seen with his interactions with Mimir throughout the entire story with him. The second thing he undergoes is a cognitive restructuring, which is led by Tyr in Valhalla. This is a type of self-analysis to understand your worldview and your inherent mindset on situations. Being able to transform negative thoughts of the world and actions of previous into something more constructive can aid in many of these symptoms listed previously, like anger and self-hatred, to dwindle away. Tyr constantly talks to Kratos about his past and his actions, understanding why he did what he did, and showing a perspective on how choices are complicated, and not all things are as simple as they first appear to be. And finally, exposure therapy in the way of Valhalla. By exposing the patient to their source of fear in a small, controlled environment and incrementally increasing their exposure over time, it can diminish the fear or anxiety responses, allowing them to surmount their negative emotions of the event. Valhalla does this in a kind of dangerous, not so safe environment. And instead of incremental increases, it kind of just drops Helios in there, who's kind of just a dick to Kratos the whole time. But the overarching idea of exposure therapy is still there. All these culminated into the end of the Valhalla DLC, where Kratos has finally come to terms with himself and his actions, and that he is... Oh, let me restate that. Where he finally comes to terms with himself and his actions, and that he is not his mistakes. He is not his triumphs. He is not what others think of him. He is the culmination of his choices, his reactions, and his handlings of other people's choices. I view the story of God of War Ragnarok as a very realistic view on humanity and its emotions. It's akin to something of Mob Psycho, where behind all the amazing abilities, mind-blowing feats, that the story of common, everyday people and their reaction with the world and their journey to becoming better. It's very endearing, because we can relate. Kratos was dealt a bad hand, but he made the most of it. He persevered and made it through to the other end, and sometimes that's all you can hope for. It wasn't a pretty process. Matter of fact, it wasn't even a linear process, but it was one that was followed through anyways. I really hope this isn't the end for Kratos. He low-key is one of my favorite characters of all time since I was a kid, but if it is, I'm glad we get to see him finally sound with his thoughts and willing to sit for a while. So yeah, that's my brief analysis of Kratos. I think he has PTSD, and I think how his character was set up and handled throughout all the games from the first God of War was done beautifully. But yeah, that's all I have to say. If you've come around this far, thank you, by the way, right? That's awesome. I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe. For anyone who's been on my channel before, Yeah, I've been gone for a while. Sorry about that. I've been very busy with school. So we're off. We're off. So I'm good for like another month before it starts up again. Hopefully, I'm not as busy next semester. But I'll try and post a couple more before I get back into it. Anyways, peace out. Have a great day.